The emergency broadcast began without warning, the transmission jarring through every communication channel across the galaxy from the farthest colony to the oldest capital. The sound of static preceded a voice trembling with an unfamiliar terror, a voice once proud now filled with raw panic. It was the voice of the Council, the supreme governing body of the galaxy. And it had never sounded weaker. Before the words broke through the airways, a message was clear. The galaxy held its breath as the voice said it over and over, as if the mere repetition would make it less real. The Deathworlders have declared us all valid targets. The transmission was broadcast in every known language, and yet no translation was needed. The shock was universal. Every sentient being across the stars could feel the weight of those words pressing down on them, each one understanding the message in their own way. The Deathworlders were no longer a myth, no longer a joke to be whispered about in dark corners of council meetings or behind closed doors. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they had come for them all. No one had seen it coming, not like this. The Council's own intelligence agencies had spent years analyzing Earth's progress. They had monitored the humans from a distance, noting their growth in technology, their expansion into the stars, their ability to adapt and survive. But never had they predicted this, never had they considered that the humans would rise up and declare war against the entire galaxy without mercy or hesitation. The galaxy had underestimated the humans for centuries. They were seen as primitives, weak, and divided their history one of endless war and strife, their home planet harsh and unforgiving. Yet somehow they survived, while others thrived in comfort and peace. Humanity's resilience was well known, but it was dismissed as a fluke. Now those same humans had come to remind everyone that resilience was only the beginning of what they were capable of. In the council chambers, panic swept through the ranks as leaders of the galaxy's most powerful races stared at the screens with growing disbelief. Representatives of the Goran Syndicate, the Slithar Dominion, the Vexian Alliance, and the Cantal Empires all shifted uncomfortably as the broadcast echoed in their minds, their finely crafted veneer of superiority beginning to crack under the pressure. They had always thought themselves safe from the humans. After all, how could such a young species with so much history of war and internal strife threaten their centuries of power? Yet the humans had made their intentions clear. They were no longer content to exist on the fringes of galactic politics. They were coming for the heart of the Council itself, and there was nowhere to hide. As the Council leaders scrambled to form a response, they could feel the weight of the threat that had just been unleashed upon them. But they had no plan, no strategy, nothing to counter the relentless march of humanity's fury. They looked to their most trusted commanders for guidance, only to see confusion and fear mirrored back at them. Outside the chambers, the news spread like wildfire. Planets, once untouched by conflict, began to stir in fear. Communications with distant colonies went silent. Military fleets across the galaxy went on high alert. The galaxy was suddenly a powder keg waiting to explode, and the humans were holding the match. The broadcast had barely ended when another transmission began to filter through the galaxy, this one much clearer and unmistakably human. The message was simple, but direct. The voice of a human commander rang out cold and unwavering. "We are coming for you." The first strike came without warning as the planet Gultranis, the jewel of the Council's empire, lay bathed in the glow of its twin suns. A single figure appeared on the horizon from the darkness of space. A lone human soldier descended through the clouds in a sleek black dropship, cutting through the sky with terrifying precision, the city below oblivious to the approaching storm. As the ship touched down in the heart of the capital, the doors opened with a hiss, and the first thing the inhabitants heard was the thunderous sound of boots hitting the ground. The figure that stepped out was clad in black armor, scratched and battered from years of combat. The human soldier was tall and muscular, but it was the eyes that held the true weight of his presence. Those cold, steely eyes spoke of countless battles fought and won, each scar across his face telling a story of survival against all odds. His expression was grim, as if he had long ago abandoned any notion of mercy. Before the city's defenses could even react, the human soldier moved with an unnatural speed, his movements a blur as he cut through the streets of Galtranis. Every corner of the city rattled as explosions shook the air, buildings crumbled under the weight of his assault. It wasn't just destruction. He was after it was something deeper, something more terrifying. He wasn't here to conquer, he was here to send a message. The Council have failed to understand what kind of creature humanity was. The elite forces of the Council scrambled to react as their best-trained soldiers descended upon the city, but it was clear from the moment they met the human soldier that they were outclassed. Every attack they launched was countered with brutal efficiency. The human moved like a shadow, dodging lasers with ease, striking with lethal precision. There was no hesitation in his actions, no mercy as he dismantled their defenses, one by one with terrifying speed and accuracy. The Council's forces fell back in disarray. In the heart of the city, the human soldier confronted a squad of the most elite soldiers. The Council had at their disposal a dozen armored warriors, armed to the teeth with the most advanced technology the galaxy had ever seen. They surrounded him, weapons raised and voices shouting orders. But the human didn't flinch. He simply raised his weapon, his rifle aimed steady in his hand, and in a blur of motion, the squad was wiped out before they even had time to fire a single shot. It was a massacre, but there was no joy in it, only the cold efficiency of a predator that knew its prey all too well. The message was clear: humanity had come for the Council, and there would be no mercy. The city's defenses finally began to mount a response, calling in air support and deploying their most advanced war machines. But even as reinforcements arrived, it was clear that they were fighting a force they couldn't comprehend. Human soldiers began to infiltrate the city, taking out communication towers and jamming signals. One by one, the Council's military assets were neutralized, their air support turned against them, their best ships disabled by human ingenuity that no one had expected. In a last-ditch effort to end the assault, the Council ordered the deployment of their heavy artillery and orbital strikes. But by the time the first shell fell, the human soldier had already slipped into the shadows, moving through the city's underbelly like a ghost. Even as the explosions lit up the night sky, his presence was everywhere and nowhere at once. As the sun set over Galtranis, the capital lay in ruins, half destroyed and abandoned. The once proud city, now little more than a battlefield scarred by the arrival of humanity. The message had been delivered, and it was unmistakable. Humanity was no longer the weak and fractured species the Council had dismissed. Humanity was the new nightmare of the galaxy, and they would stop at nothing to take what they had come for. The broadcast of the destruction spread across the stars, a single image of the human soldier standing amidst the wreckage, his weapon slung over his shoulder, the ruins of Galtranis burning in the distance. And in that image, humanity's declaration was clear. They were no longer to be underestimated, no longer to be ignored. They were the Deathworlders, and the galaxy would soon learn the true meaning of that title. Inside the Council chambers, the air was thick with panic as the broadcast of the destruction on Galtranis replayed over and over. Every Council leader stared in stunned disbelief, their hearts pounding in their chests as they watched their most powerful city crumble before the hands of a single human soldier. The room was a cacophony of voices, all speaking over each other. No one could process the magnitude of what had just happened. The leaders of the galaxy's most powerful races had gathered to discuss the latest reports from their military commanders. When the transmission began, their faces drained of color as the human soldier's face appeared on their screens. He was the epitome of calm in the chaos, standing amidst the smoldering ruins of the city. The image was chilling. It was as though he had known exactly what would happen, and yet he was completely unfazed by it, as if this was nothing more than a routine mission, something he did every day without breaking a sweat. The representatives of the Goron Syndicate, the Slithar Dominion, the Vexian Alliance, and the Kantar Empires were unnerved as the broadcast cut to silence, only the faintest hum of static left in its wake. Their thoughts raced furiously, trying to reconcile what they had seen with the arrogance they had held toward humanity for so long. How did they know? One of the Vexian delegates hissed, their voice shaky. "We had no intelligence suggesting they were capable of this kind of assault. This is beyond our technology. We should have never underestimated them." Another voice cracked from the Slithar representative. The humans are more than resilient, they're more dangerous than we imagined. There was no comfort to be found in the Council's assembled leaders. They were all trapped in their own fear as they realized they had never truly understood what they were dealing with. The human species was unpredictable, cunning, and far more advanced in warfare than anyone had given them credit for. "They were waiting for this moment," said a Cantor general, his voice cold and calculated. "The humans have been watching us for years, quietly building their strength. While we turned a blind eye to their progress, they knew we would underestimate them, and now they've struck before we could react." An elder of the Goran syndicate slammed his fist on the table, his face flushed with anger and frustration. "We've been complacent, trusting in our superior technology, our mighty fleets, and now a single human soldier has brought us to our knees. How do we recover from this?" The question lingered in the air, unanswered for a long moment, as the leaders exchanged nervous glances. Their once vaunted military strategies now seemed laughable compared to the audacity and efficiency of the Deathworlders' assault. No one could deny the truth: humanity had come for them, and they had no idea how to stop it. Outside the chamber, the galaxy was already feeling the effects of the broadcast. Planets that had once lived in peaceful isolation were now preparing for war. Those that had relied on the Council's protection found themselves suddenly vulnerable to the human threat. Messages from across the stars flooded the Council channels, begging for guidance, asking for defense plans. But there was no response, only silence as the Council members argued among themselves. The panic grew as word spread that human soldiers were already preparing to strike other key worlds. Even as the leaders debated the best course of action, the human war machine was already moving toward its next target. It became clear that the humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were waging a war of retribution, a war to make the galaxy pay for its arrogance. The Council's military command scrambled to respond, their fleets mobilizing at a breakneck pace. But even their best ships seemed woefully inadequate against the sheer unpredictability of human tactics. They had no idea how to prepare for an enemy that didn't fight by the same rules. They did no idea how to fight an enemy that knew no boundaries and cared nothing for the consequences. The leaders sat in stunned silence as the first reports came in that human forces had already infiltrated strategic outposts across the galaxy, taking out key communication networks and disrupting military operations everywhere. The humans left a trail of destruction, but more than that, they left behind an undeniable message. This war had only just begun, and the Council's time was running out. From Earth came the next broadcast, and it shook the galaxy to its core. The transmission was clean and clear. A single human voice echoed through every channel as it swept across the stars. Each race heard it in their own language. But the message was unmistakable and chilling. Humanity's voice did not tremble with fear, nor with hesitation. It was calm, cold, and filled with a deadly certainty. "We are coming for you." The simple message reverberated through the galaxy, carrying with it an aura of finality. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't a warning, it was a declaration of war, and it was clear that humanity was no longer a species confined to the fringes of galactic power. They had just set the stage for a war that no one had expected, no one had wanted, but one that would soon swallow the galaxy whole. On Earth, millions of humans watched as the broadcast aired. They had waited for this moment for years, and now that it had come, they weren't afraid. The message was clear. The time for peace and negotiation was over. Humanity had come to reclaim what had been taken from them, to take their place among the stars, not as beggars or supplicants, but as conquerors and rulers. The government of Earth wasted no time in mobilizing their forces. Orders were given to every military command, every fleet that could be mustered to prepare for battle. Earth's resources were tapped into, and within hours humanity's war machine was fully activated. The factories that had once been used for civilian goods were converted to produce weapons and military technology with an efficiency that sent shockwaves through the Council. The scale and speed at which humanity operated was staggering. Across the colonies, Earth's allies also began to move their forces in coordination with the new unified command. While some had been wary of humanity's growing power, no one doubted that they had been pushed too far, and that humanity would stop at nothing to exact their revenge. In the council chambers, the mood shifted from panic to desperation as the council's leaders scrambled to formulate a plan. The fleet that had once seemed invincible was now just a paper tiger in the face of humanity's brutality. They had never considered that the humans could become such a relentless force capable of waging war on such a scale, and now they had no clear response. They debated their next move, but every idea seemed futile. Nothing could stop the oncoming storm of human wrath. The Goran Syndicate tried to offer an alliance with the Vexian Alliance, hoping to present a united front, but their efforts fell apart almost instantly. Neither side trusted the other enough to take decisive action against humanity. Instead, the Council continued to argue, while Earth moved with terrifying precision and speed, sending ships and troops across the stars with ruthless determination. Humanity's response was far from a simple invasion. It was a calculated wave of terror designed to strike at the heart of the Council's power. With brutal efficiency, human forces hit the most strategically important worlds, first disabling communication networks and launching surprise strikes on the Council's military bases. The humans had a way of appearing out of nowhere, with no warning, then disappearing just as quickly, leaving only destruction in their wake. Every world that had once felt safe within the reach of the Council's fleets now found themselves vulnerable to humanity's unpredictable tactics. Ships were destroyed in ambushes that seemed almost impossible to pull off. Entire fleets were ambushed and annihilated by soldiers who had no fear of the Council's technology, no respect for the galaxy's laws of war. They fought without restraint, using tactics that bent the very laws of physics in ways the Council's elite military had never been prepared for. The broadcast from Earth wasn't just a statement of intent, it was a call to arms, and as the Council sat in their chambers, paralyzed by fear, the rest of the galaxy was already beginning to understand that they were now part of something much larger than they had ever imagined. The Deathworlders had declared their existence to be undeniable, and the galaxy would now have to face the true might of humanity. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity's forces spread like a wave, crashing onto the shores of Council worlds, each attack more brutal than the last. No warning, no mercy, just sudden devastating strikes that left nothing but devastation in their wake. Ships, once thought untouchable, were reduced to smoldering wreckage in the void of space. Entire colonies were swept into chaos as human forces infiltrated deep within enemy lines. There were no rules, no boundaries, only relentless attacks that had one purpose: to break the Council's grip on the galaxy and show that humanity had come to claim their place among the stars. On the planets where the humans landed, the impact was immediate and violent. Entire military outposts were torn apart within hours, and cities were left burning in their wake. Each human soldier was a nightmare given form. They fought with the intensity of creatures that had evolved to survive in the harshest of environments, never slowing down, never hesitating. They were a force that the galaxy had never encountered before, and they were fighting not just for victory, but for the very future of humanity. Council leaders sat behind their walls, now aware of how vulnerable they truly were. Their defenses crumbled under the human onslaught as fleets and armies they had once relied upon proved ineffective against the brutal tactics the humans employed. Nothing was sacred, nothing was protected. The Deathworlders were everywhere, and they adapted faster than any force the galaxy had ever seen. The human soldiers seemed to understand their enemies better than the enemies understood themselves. They knew how to fight against every kind of warfare, how to counter every weapon, every strategy the Council could throw at them. Human forces tore through military barracks and control centers like a storm, wiping out entire divisions in a single day before vanishing into the darkness, only to reappear somewhere else to wreak havoc once again. What stunned the Council most was the precision of the attacks. It wasn't just that the humans were able to inflict damage, it was how they did it. Each strike was part of a larger plan, one that involved more than just overwhelming firepower. It was a game of manipulation and misdirection, forcing the Council to waste valuable resources. While the humans struck at their weakest points, the Deathworlders didn't just fight with strength, they fought with intelligence and cunning. And it was clear that they had been preparing for this war far longer than anyone had realized. Council fleets were decimated by surprise attacks and counterattacks from humans who had somehow infiltrated their command centers before their ships even reached orbit. Entire space stations went dark without explanation, and when the human forces struck, they did so without mercy, no negotiations, no surrender, only complete destruction in their wake. As word spread of humanity's swift and devastating victories across the galaxy, fear began to take hold even among the Council's closest allies. No one was sure what would come next, but everyone knew that it was only a matter of time before the humans would strike again. Their reputation had already spread like wildfire across the stars, and now every species was forced to reckon with the fact that the Deathworlders were more than just a threat. They were the new rulers of the galaxy. The Council's military was thrown into disarray as fleets retreated back to their strongholds. Military officers panicked, trying to form new strategies, but each plan crumbled in the face of humanity's relentless assaults. Even as they tried to reorganize and regroup, the human war machine continued to gain momentum, each victory feeding the fear that was beginning to spread through the galaxy like a plague. The leaders of the galaxy could no longer ignore the truth. Humanity was not just a small threat, it was a force that had shattered the balance of power, and now the galaxy was left to wonder if anyone could stand against the Deathworlders, or if humanity was on the brink of becoming the new and uncontested rulers of the stars. The hunt had begun. Humanity was no longer just defending their home or striking at Council strongholds. They were stalking the galaxy like predators. The war had evolved beyond simple conflict. It had become a pursuit, a relentless chase, where the hunters were now the hunted, and the Deathworlders had all the advantages. Once the humans had been underestimated, written off as weak and disorganized. But now they were everywhere, moving in the shadows, slipping through the cracks, and striking with surgical precision. No place was safe, not anymore. Across Council worlds, fear gripped every species. No one knew where the humans would strike next. Their tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They had learned to exploit every vulnerability and twist every advantage to their favor. The human soldiers infiltrated every corner of the galaxy. No world was too distant, no system too secure. They moved through cities undetected, cutting power to entire sectors before turning them into war zones. Every move calculated, every step designed to break their enemies without mercy. The Council's military was stretched thin. They had once relied on their overwhelming firepower, their superior technology, but nothing they had was enough to stop the human tide. Now their fleets were decimated, their forces scattered, and their intelligence agencies were in disarray. Every plan they tried to implement was turned against them. The Deathworlders seemed to anticipate every move before they made it, forcing the galaxy's mightiest leaders to face the truth. They had no idea how to fight an enemy that was always one step ahead of them. In the midst of the chaos, humanity showed no signs of slowing down. They didn't just fight for survival, they fought for dominance. The war wasn't just about reclaiming territory, it was about reshaping the galaxy. It was a statement that the old ways were over, and the humans were here to claim their place among the stars as the apex predators they had always been destined to be. The human forces launched wave after wave of attacks across every sector. They hit at key locations. Without warning, they destroyed supply lines, disrupted communications, and made entire planets uninhabitable. They didn't need to conquer each world, they simply needed to destabilize the Council's control over them. While the galaxy watched in horror, humanity was making its move, and there was no stopping it. Even the most secure Council bases fell before the humans' unpredictable tactics. Entire fleets were destroyed in ambushes that left their commanders scrambling to understand what had just happened. Fleets that once seemed invincible were now scattered wrecks floating in space, their commanding officers killed or captured in the blink of an eye. Human soldiers moved with terrifying efficiency, no hesitation, no mercy, as they broke through defenses that had once been thought impenetrable. And as each victory piled up, humanity grew bolder. Their actions became more daring, more destructive. Their soldiers no longer only fought on the ground or in space, but infiltrated the highest levels of the Council's infrastructure. They planted bombs in key locations, sabotaged everything from military hardware to civilian networks, and left nothing but chaos in their wake. No one could predict their next move because the humans themselves were the chaos. They were not just invading, they were dismantling the galaxy's foundation piece by piece. Council leaders watched helplessly as their power unraveled from within. Their once indomitable empire was turning to dust. Humanity's message was clear, and it rang across the stars louder and louder until the entire galaxy heard it echoing in their minds. There would be no peace, no negotiations, no escape from what was coming. Humanity was not just a force to be reckoned with. They were the new rulers of the stars, and they would stop at nothing to reshape the galaxy in their image. The hunt was far from over. It was only just beginning, and the galaxy had no idea what it would look like when the humans have finished. The galaxy was teetering on the brink of total collapse as humanity's war raged on with ever-increasing ferocity. No world was untouched, no species spared the consequences of underestimating the Deathworlders. Their relentless pursuit of power had thrown the established order into chaos. The once proud council was now on the defensive, scrambling to protect what little remained of their influence as human forces continued to carve through their defenses with terrifying precision. The humans had become more than just a military threat. They were a symbol of the galaxy's failure to recognize the true strength of the human spirit. They were the reckoning for all the arrogance that had been built upon centuries of peace and complacency. Their very presence challenged everything the Council had stood for. Every treaty, every agreement had been shattered by the very force they had so long underestimated. Humanity was a force of nature now, and they had no intentions of stopping. The council leaders had fled to their most secure strongholds, their once grand meeting halls now filled with fear and regret as they realized that their ability to command the galaxy had slipped through their fingers. The news came in waves, military reports from every corner of the galaxy telling the same story. Human forces had outmaneuvered their fleets, infiltrated their defenses, and destroyed the very foundations of their empire. Entire sectors were lost in a matter of days, and still the humans pushed on without hesitation. No planet was left untouched by their wrath. Each one was either consumed by the flames of war or systematically crippled by the humans' brutal tactics. Entire populations were either forced into submission or eradicated as humanity took what it needed, not through conquest, but through dominance. They didn't just defeat the Council's forces, they made an example of them. Every time they won a battle, they left behind a message, a trail of destruction that spoke louder than any words could. The leaders of the galaxy watched as their greatest cities burned, their fleets lay in ruins, and their allies turned against them in fear of the human onslaught. They had no more answers, no more plans, and no more strength to resist humanity's unrelenting advance. The humans had shattered every illusion of invincibility the galaxy's ruling powers had once held, and now they were left with only the cold reality that humanity was the new force to be reckoned with. On the front lines, humanity showed no signs of slowing. Their soldiers moved with deadly purpose, striking at key positions. Wherever they found weakness, they fought without mercy, wiping out entire divisions. Without hesitation, the human military had become a well-oiled machine of destruction, and every race that once felt safe under the Council's protection now found themselves exposed to the full wrath of Earth's soldiers. No alliance could stand against them, no weapon could pierce their resolve. The Council attempted to regroup, to form new strategies, but each move they made was met with brutal counterattacks. Human forces anticipated that every step, and when they made their moves, it was always with surgical precision, no wasted effort, no missteps. Humanity's tactics were not bound by tradition or the conventions of warfare. They fought with an efficiency that left their enemies gasping for air as they struggled to keep up. What remained of the Council's forces was scattered and broken, the once proud fleets reduced to floating wreckage in the vacuum of space, their commanders either dead or in hiding. Their military might no longer a factor in the fight. The humans had proved themselves too unpredictable, too relentless for any conventional force to counter. They had broken the Council's war machine, and now they stood as the undisputed rulers of the galaxy's battlefield. On the home front, Earth's government had already begun to assert its dominance. Their leaders spoke with authority now, and the people of Earth responded with unwavering loyalty. They knew that the future of their species was at stake, and they fought not just for survival, but for the future of all humanity. They were no longer just defenders, they were conquerors, and they would stop at nothing to claim their rightful place among the stars. The Council had fallen silent in the face of this unstoppable force. Their efforts to resist humanity had failed. Every strategy, every countermeasure had been rendered useless, and they had no more cards to play. Humanity had already won, and the galaxy now had no choice but to accept the new order that was coming. The Deathworlders had spoken, and the galaxy would bow to them or be crushed beneath their might. The Council was crumbling, and with every passing day, humanity's grip on the galaxy tightened. No corner was safe, no system untouched. The vast empires that once ruled the stars now found themselves on the brink of extinction as human forces spread further and further from Earth. Each victory adding to the weight of their unstoppable momentum. Their once impressive fleets reduced to scattered debris, and every military installation that had once served as a symbol of the galaxy's might now lay silent and abandoned. Humanity had already begun to reshape the very fabric of the galaxy with terrifying precision. Their soldiers had become more than just conquerors. They had become architects of a new era, a brutal era, where power was no longer measured by fleets or weapons, but by the ability to break the will of the galaxy's most powerful leaders. In a single blow, every world they took became part of a larger plan to dismantle the Council's empire piece by piece, and with each planet that fell under human control, the galaxy's remaining leaders knew their time was running out. The leaders of the Council now hid behind fortified walls and secret locations, their once confident voices now reduced to whispers as they tried desperately to find a way to stop the human onslaught. But the truth had become undeniable. Humanity was not just a passing threat. They were a force of nature, an unstoppable wave that would engulf everything in its path. The species that had once thought themselves untouchable now found themselves scrambling to survive in a universe that had been forever changed by the humans' wrath. Their military fleets that had once been the pride of their civilizations now looked like relics of a past era as humanity's soldiers struck from the shadows and attacked with ruthless efficiency, every move calculated and every strategy designed to ensure their dominance. No one could fight back, no one had the strength to face them. In every part of the galaxy, humanity's presence was felt, from the farthest reaches of the outer rim to the core systems. Their forces were everywhere, infiltrating communication networks, sabotaging defenses, and taking out key leadership. In one devastating strike after another, the galaxy's most powerful empires crumbled under the weight of human tactics, and every resistance movement that had once stood in defiance was either crushed or forced to join the human cause. The Council's last-ditch efforts to rally their forces came too late. Their fleets were already decimated, their planets already lost, and their remaining allies had turned their backs on them in fear of becoming humanity's next target. The once proud Council that had controlled the galaxy with a sense of entitlement and superiority was now nothing more than a shell of its former self, a broken alliance that had failed to recognize the true nature of the Deathworlders. Humanity's leaders did not offer terms of surrender. There was no negotiation, no mercy offered to those who had once oppressed them. They didn't need to make demands, because their victory was inevitable. The message had been delivered in every battle, in every world that had fallen under their might. Humanity was the new power in the galaxy, and everyone would either accept it or be destroyed. And so the galaxy fell silent as the final battle played out, a battle not of guns and ships, but of willpower and determination. Humanity had proven that no force was too great to be toppled by sheer persistence and strength, no empire too secure to withstand their assault. The Council's last stronghold fell into ruin, and with it any hope for resistance against humanity's rule. As the last Council leaders were captured or destroyed, humanity stood victorious at the dawn of a new era, no longer a fledgling species, but the dominant force in the galaxy. The Deathworlders had risen, and in their wake they left only ashes and the remnants of an empire that had been too arrogant to recognize the true cost of underestimating them. Humanity had claimed their place at the top, and now the galaxy would bend to their will. The galaxy was no longer the same. The old powers were gone, and a new order had emerged, one ruled by the indomitable strength of the humans who had once been dismissed as weak. Now, They stood as the supreme power in the universe, and everyone who survived would have to learn to live by their rules or face their wrath. The galaxy was irrevocably changed. No one could deny the dominance humanity now held. They had risen from the fringes of civilization and torn through the galaxy with a force and determination that left no room for doubt. Earth's forces now controlled the most crucial sectors of space. Their ships and soldiers patrolled the stars with ruthless efficiency. No corner was untouched, no system left to chance. Humanity had not just conquered, they had reshaped the galaxy in their own image, and the universe had to bend to their will. On the worlds where humanity had claimed victory, entire populations were forced to accept the new order. Those who resisted were either eliminated or driven into submission, and as the months passed, the once mighty empires of the Council were reduced to a handful of isolated systems, struggling to hold on to their power. Their fleets were no more, their leaders captured or dead, and their influence was nothing more than a distant memory of a time before humanity's arrival. Earth's leaders now spoke with a newfound authority. They ruled the galaxy with a steady hand, their decisions final, and without mercy. They had established new laws, new systems of governance, and all those who lived under their rule had no choice but to obey the once great council, now reduced to a footnote in galactic history. The message humanity had sent was clear, and it echoed through every corner of the galaxy. This was their galaxy now, and any who defied them would be erased. The species of the galaxy were left to ponder their future. Some had surrendered without a fight, pledging their loyalty to the new order. Others had resisted, but were crushed under the weight of humanity's war machine. But all were forced to accept that the age of the Council was over. Humanity had made it clear they were not to be denied, not now and not ever. In the wake of the war, Earth began to establish new diplomatic relationships with the surviving species. But these were not negotiations born of mutual respect. They were demands made under the threat of force. Every race that remained was given a choice to join humanity's new empire or face complete annihilation. Those who complied were granted resources and protection under the new order. But even these agreements were made with the understanding that humanity held all the power. The galaxy had become a place where survival was no longer about strength or technology. It was about obedience to the new rulers. Humanity's supremacy was absolute, and every faction that once thought themselves powerful now knew the cold truth. No matter how advanced their technology or how vast their fleets, humanity was a force they could not fight. And yet, despite their overwhelming dominance, the humans did not stop their expansion. They continued to push outward, exploring new systems and securing new territories. Their ambitions were limitless, and their hunger for control seemed insatiable. They were not content with simply dominating the Council. They wanted to reshape the very fabric of the galaxy itself, to mold it into something that served their needs and desires, and anyone who stood in their way was either conquered or eradicated. Humanity had no illusions about their future. They knew that their rule would be challenged eventually, that others would rise up to test their power, but they were ready for it. They had proven time and time again that they could overcome any obstacle, no matter the odds, and the galaxy now knew that there was no stopping the Deathworlders. In the years that followed, humanity's influence grew even stronger, and the once proud races of the galaxy were left to deal with the consequences of their own arrogance. They had thought themselves untouchable, but now they were at the mercy of the very species they had once overlooked. Humanity had not just won the war, they had rewritten the rules of existence, and in doing so had made it clear that no one would ever be able to challenge their place at the top. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, and as they stood at the pinnacle of power, the Deathworlders knew that this was only the beginning. Their empire was just taking shape, and the universe would have to learn to live by their rules or face the consequences. The galaxy had fallen into an eerie stillness as the dust settled from the war. The fires of conflict had burned bright, but now they had died down, leaving only the scorched remains of what had been the old order. Humanity stood atop the ashes, not in triumph, but in quiet control. The universe had learned to bow to the Deathworlders, and yet no one could say exactly how they had done it. The sheer speed and ferocity of humanity's rise had left the galaxy in a permanent state of unease. Now that they were the undisputed rulers of the stars, humanity began to focus not on conquest, But on consolidation, they had taken the galaxy by storm, and now they had to maintain their control. The humans moved through the galaxy with a quiet authority, no longer the insurgent forces that had taken every world. By force, they were the governing power, the ones who set the rules and made the laws, and all races were expected to obey them without question. Earth's government had expanded its reach far beyond its original borders. Now every world that fell under humanity's control was governed by new laws, new systems designed to maintain humanity's dominance and structure their rule was absolute. Their military presence, a constant reminder that no race could challenge their authority. Any dissidence was dealt with swiftly and decisively. Even the few species who had tried to form alliances against the humans found themselves crushed under the weight of Earth's might and left in ruins as cautionary tales for those who might try to rise against them. The human empire stretched far and wide, and its power grew ever more immense. No one had the strength or the resources to oppose them. Humanity controlled the most vital resources in the galaxy, and every race that had once been a threat to them now found themselves dependent on humanity for trade, for technology, and for protection. The Deathworlders had not only conquered, they had rewritten the rules of existence, and everyone had to play by their terms. The galaxy had become a place where survival was no longer about individual power or strength. It was about aligning oneself with humanity or facing complete eradication. The human empire was no longer just a government, it was a force of nature, and the galaxy had learned to accept it or perish trying. And yet, even in this age of unquestioned control, there was a nagging question in the minds of those who lived under the human rule. What next? What would humanity do now that they had everything they had sought for so long? Was their hunger for power truly satisfied? Or would they continue to grow, expand, and conquer until there was nothing left of the galaxy except the cold, silent presence of humanity's empire? For the first time in history, the galaxy's greatest powers sat in a tenuous peace under the rule of the Deathworlders, and despite the surface calm, there was a growing sense of unease. Humanity had proven themselves to be an unstoppable force once they had been provoked. But what would they do now that no one dared challenge them? The galaxy's inhabitants knew they had no answer, and that was perhaps the most unsettling realization of all. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity's leaders continued to exert their influence, shaping their new empire in their image. They were no longer just rulers of a single planet, they were the architects of a new universe, and their vision was one of absolute control. Each new decision, each new law was a calculated step toward total domination, and no one, no matter how powerful or ancient, could stand in their way. But even as the